In this video, I am going to walk you through the path that blood takes as it travels through the heart. We are going to start this journey at the right atrium, which is this chamber right here. The right atrium receives blood from 3 different sources. The first is from the superior vena cava. This large vein contains all of the blood that is returning to the heart from the head and the upper limb. Another vessel that delivers blood into the right atrium is the inferior vena cava. This is bringing blood from the abdomen, the pelvis, and the lower limb back into the heart. And then this little circle right here, this is showing us the coronary sinus. This is the blood that was pumped to the heart in the coronary arteries and used to provide oxygen and nutrients to the myocardium, to the heart itself. That blood is then going to come into cardiac veins and eventually the coronary sinus, which will dump into the right atrium. After blood is in the right atrium, it is going to get pumped or flow passively through this valve right here into our right ventricle. So I'm going to label the ventricle and then we'll come back to the valve. All right, this valve over here is the right atrioventricular valve. We can abbreviate atrioventricular as simply AV, right AV valve. Now here's another one of those situations where there's more than one name for a single structure, and as we're transitioning away from the old names towards the new names, you have to learn all of them so that you can help make this change but still understand the clinicians who are going to call them different things. So in addition to calling this the right atrioventricular valve, this valve is often commonly referred to as the tricuspid valve. Why the tricuspid? Well, tri means 3. And while you can't see this in a 2-dimensional drawing, if you're looking at a cadaver heart, you will typically see that there are 3 leaflets or cusps to this valve. Okay, so we have brought blood that is low in oxygen, that's why I'm using the blue marker right now, into the right atrium through the right AV valve and into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is then going to contract and squeeze that blood through our next valve right here. This is our pulmonary semilunar valve. And after it travels through the pulmonary semilunar valve, it's going to find itself in this vessel right here, which is the pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk is going to split into a right and a left pulmonary artery. Now, these are strange as far as arteries go because we're using the blue marker, which means these are low in oxygen. Arteries and veins are not named for their oxygen content, they are named for the direction that blood is flowing. Arteries are vessels that carry blood away from the heart, and that's what we're doing, right? We got pumped by the ventricle, and now we're going away from the heart. They're pulmonary because they are taking us to the lungs. So let's do some quick lungs over here and over here. Now, if you think about the width of the human thorax, right? In reality, the lungs and the heart are much, much closer to each other. Like, they're literally touching. And these pulmonary vessels are much shorter than I have them drawn here. But to really see the blood flow and understand kind of how everything is connected, we grossly enlarge it to help it make sense. All right, so this low oxygen blood is traveling to the lungs. At the lungs is where gas exchange is going to occur. So we are going to add oxygen into the blood and allow the carbon dioxide to exit the blood. We'll study this in great detail later. So now that we have high oxygen blood, we are going to switch to the pink marker. All right, this high oxygen blood is then going to travel back to the heart in pulmonary veins. And these are going to be bilaterally symmetrical. We have them on the right and the left. All right, those pulmonary veins are going to dump us into this chamber right here, our left atrium. From the left atrium, we will pass through another atrioventricular valve. So there's even an extra name for this one. We can call it the left atrioventricular, or AV valve. Or if you're on the clinic, you might hear this referred to as the bicuspid valve, because unlike the tricuspid, this only has two cusps, usually. Or the mitral valve. There is a hat called a mitre worn by certain members of clergy in the Catholic Church, and a long time ago, some anatomist said, hey, this valve looks like this hat that this guy at church wears. That's how we named things in anatomy back in the day. Now we call it a left AV valve because it tells us we're on the left side of the heart between the atrium and the ventricle. And that name is much more descriptive and actually gives us some information about the valve. After the blood heads through that AV valve, it finds itself in the left ventricle. And the left ventricle will pump it through the aortic semilunar valve. Into this vessel here, which is our aorta. We'll meet the branches of the arch of the aorta as well as the descending aorta in subsequent videos. So I'm going to go through this one more time relatively quickly to make sure we didn't miss anything. Blood comes into the right atrium of the heart from either the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, or the coronary sinus. It passes through the right atrioventricular valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle pumps it through the pulmonary trunk, which splits to give us two pulmonary arteries that take this low oxygen blood to the lungs. In the lungs is where gas exchange occurs. We have oxygen entering the blood and carbon dioxide leaving the blood. The pulmonary veins will bring that high oxygen blood back to the heart, specifically the left atrium. From there, blood will flow through the left atrioventricular valve into the left ventricle, which will then pump that blood through the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta. It's quite a journey, but this is what the heart is doing and its associated vessels during each cardiac cycle. Blood's coming in, being pumped, coming in, being pumped, and that's what allows us to move oxygen and nutrients around the body to all of the other cells that need it.